Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wioya. Chapter 80. Master of the Corpse Blood Valley. Part 1. Upon hearing about some of the memories gleaned from Gyu Soha, who had possessed Nung Huayong's body, Mok Jiangun showed an intrigued reaction. He still had no interest in how the martial world worked, but with the information Soha had read, he could now surmise the relationship between the Righteous Alliance and the Heaven and Earth Society. Adversaries. What was interesting here was the reason for their conflict. They were hostile towards each other due to differences in beliefs and ways of thinking. To Mok Jiangun, this felt quite outdated. What kind of emotions drove people to risk their lives not over simple grievances, but over differing values they believed in? Justice, it's quite inefficient. Inefficient. Yes, that's true too. But there's nothing more fearsome than values and beliefs. Why is that? Nothing is more draining than believing oneself to be absolutely right, even more so than resentment. I can relate to that. Chang Ryong was right. Although he hadn't met that many people, Mok Jiangun also found those who considered themselves unconditionally righteous the most tiresome. Most of them saw everything other than themselves as wrong. Perhaps that's why Mok Jiangun despised such people the most. Just hearing the names of the groups is exhausting. Righteous Alliance? Do they call themselves that because they consider themselves just? That's how those types are. But the Righteous Alliance calls the Heaven and Earth Society evil or demonic? Nonsense. At Mok Jiangun's words, Chang Ryong raised her voice. They have a dichotomous way of thinking. They're stubborn fools who think if they're white, everything else must be black. Is that so? Then I suppose the Heaven and Earth Society isn't the evil faction they make it out to be. The Heaven and Earth Society we created was not such a simple organization. We created? Mok Jiangun narrowed his eyes. Had she also contributed to creating this massive organization? However, without expressing it, he questioned a different part. It wasn't a simple organization? Yes. The notions of demonic cult or evil ways are repulsive labels imposed by those hypocrites. But the Heaven and Earth Society was established to reject that and create a true martial world. A true martial world? Since when did the righteous way become justice and everything else the root of evil in the martial world? I wouldn't know that either. Of course. There was no way for Mok Jiangun to know. He had lived a life far removed from the martial world from the start. Chang Ryong clicked her tongue and spoke. What the Heaven and Earth Society pursued was for the martial world to return to its most primitive form. Primitive? What's that? The weak are meat, the strong eat. Survival of the fittest. The strong dominate. The essence of martial arts is ultimately to prove one's own strength. In the beginning, it was called the martial forest because it was entangled in pursuit of pure strength. But the current martial world is merely a war of rotten values. Where is there black and white in the world? Even white paper turns black when ink is poured, and a butcher becomes a Buddha when he lays down his knife. If you want to discuss the world in terms of color, shouldn't it be gray? Her voice was full of resentment. That anger felt not one-dimensional like Mok Jiangun's own, but directed at the world. Mok Jiangun then asked as if curious. Then are you saying the Heaven and Earth Society is gray? At that question, Chang Ryong suddenly fell silent. I see. Just from that, he could tell what she thought of the current Heaven and Earth Society. It was likely not the gray she spoke of. That was probably why she felt disillusioned with the current Heaven and Earth Society. Mok Jiangun changed the subject. Well, putting that aside, thanks to this, I learned some good information. The emissaries of the Righteous Alliance. When possessing someone, one could read some of the target's memories. Not all of them, but he had obtained useful information. When an organization's scale grows to thousands or tens of thousands, naturally gaps form and sending spies to each other becomes frequent. It's only natural, nothing to be surprised about. But they're more foolish than I thought. What do you mean? I'm talking about these silent stride spies. Them? Yes. For spies, secrecy for intelligence is their lifeblood. But for the dispatched spies to share this much information about each other, tsk. Mok Jae-eun nodded as if agreeing with her words. It was his first time seeing the existence of spies, but considering they infiltrated enemy organizations as fake members, it seemed like quite a strategically poor choice. In a situation like now, if one person opened their mouth, they would all be exposed one after another. However, what mattered now was not their foolishness. So what will you do? Who knows? It seems too late to just leave him be. It appeared he had made quite an enemy of the Silent Stride spies. Of course, it was understandable. Because of him, their numbers had dwindled, and the probability of successfully completing their mission had also drastically decreased. It may be revenge for losing comrades, but they likely think killing you will make it easier to pass future checkpoints. From the latter perspective, it's not a wrong choice. It's not the right choice either. True. If they succeed, it's a different story, but if they fail, they must pay the corresponding price. That was the current situation. Gyu Soha, who had taken over Nung Wyong's body, spoke in an eager voice. Master. Shall I go and deal with them one by one? They had obtained the body of Nung Wyong, a Silent Stride spy. Since they knew each other's identities, she could easily induce carelessness to kill them or destroy their Danjian and turn them into half-cripples, just as they had tried to do. However, Mok Jae-eun shook his head. What? Don't tell me you're going to let them off? No. It seems there's no need to go through that trouble. No need? Then what will you do? This might be better. The corner of Mok Jae-eun's mouth curled up eerily. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Pat pat. Ha 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 ha. To think you found the spies, it's all thanks to you. One of the red-belted warriors patted Mok Jae-eun's back, praising his achievement. Mok Jae-eun's choice regarding the Silent Stride spies was simple. There was no need to deal with them one by one. It was to inform the red-belted warriors of who the spies were. Killing two birds with one stone. He dealt with them without getting blood on his own hands and gained an opportunity to earn merit with the Heaven and Earth Society by revealing the spies' existence. It was truly killing two birds with one stone. Of course, the only one in an unfortunate situation was Green Spirit Gyu Soha, who had to divulge being a spy with the body she had barely obtained and then discarded again. Ah. That guy over there is also from the Silent Strides like me. However, Gyu Soha faithfully played her role. The place Gyu Soha pointed to with her finger was the stairs leading to the upper floor, and a boy there looked flustered and at a loss. Huh? Mok Jae-eun recognized who that boy was. It was the boy who had passed the second checkpoint in his group. He remembered him because he had tried to kill Embo Harang, who had lost consciousness after getting injured while fighting Mok Yu-cheon. Was his name Ma Sang? At that moment. Swish. Ma Sang hurriedly leaped up the stairs. Get him. Swish swish swish. The red-belted warriors shouted and chased after him. If the information in the Silent Stride spy Nung Wyong's memory was correct, he should be the last of the 4 spies who barely survived. He had come looking for them himself, what bad luck. However, why is he glaring at me like that? Mok Jae-eun looked at Mok Yu-cheon, who was glaring at him as if he wanted to kill him. His eyes were filled with considerable resentment. Come to think of it, it seemed he had come down the stairs alongside Ma Sang, the Silent Stride spy. At this, Mok Jae-eun's eyes narrowed. He seems to know something. There was no way he would glare at him like that otherwise. What a simple guy. If it were him, he wouldn't have shown such emotions if he had some connection or collusion with the spies. Yet Mok Yu-cheon was very honest with his own feelings. Mok Jae-eun smirked at this. Simple-minded. Was it because he was still young? Should he just use this opportunity to brand that guy as a spy along with the fleeing one and deal with him? In a split second, Mok Jae-eun internally rejected this idea. Not yet. Although it was fake, in the Heaven and Earth Society, He and Mok Yucheon were from the same Yen Mok Sword Manor's lineage. If he gave even the slightest cause for suspicion while they were connected, it might hinder his assimilation into the Heaven and Earth Society. I should leave him be a bit longer. There would be plenty of opportunities to deal with him. Mok Jaeyoung waved at Mok Yucheon and gave him a smile. As if even more enraged by this, Mok Yucheon stomped up the stairs with a reddened face. Just then, someone approached and spoke to him. Mok Jaeyoung. Ah. Yes. It was a middle-aged man who looked older than the other red-belted warriors. A senior warrior, was it? He pointed to the lower floor and spoke to Mok Jaeyoung. The master is summoning you. Master? Did he mean the one with the demon mask? Mok Jaeyoung followed the senior warrior and headed downstairs. The first floor lodging was being used by the red-belted warriors conducting the checkpoints, and the room attached to the office in the center was being used by the master of the Corpse Blood Valley. Knock knock. Someone knocked on the door and spoke. I brought him, my lord. At the voice coming from outside, someone who had been sitting in a chair in the office, gazing at a bronze mirror, opened his mouth. Have him wait a moment. Yes. The person sitting in the chair pushed the bronze mirror to the side. Through the gap of the mirror being moved aside, a face with burned scars briefly flashed by. Soon, the person put on a mask that had been placed on the office desk. It was a demon mask. Send him in. Yes. At the demon mask's command, the door soon opened, and a handsome boy entered. It was none other than Mok Jaeyoung. Mok Jaeyoung lightly bowed his head in greeting. The demon mask waved his hand and pointed to a chair for receiving guests. Sit. Yes. As Mok Jaeyoung sat in the chair, the demon mask also rose from his office chair and walked over to sit across from him. The demon mask stared intently at Mok Jaeyoung. In response, Mok Jaeyoung also met his gaze head-on without avoiding his eyes. Look at this guy. He was bold to not avoid his gaze. A glint of interest flashed in the demon mask's eyes visible through the gaps of the mask. Since taking on the role of master of the Corpse Blood Valley, this was the first time he had encountered such a fellow. Naturally, there had occasionally been those with outstanding martial talent who passed the checkpoints in a short time or used unexpectedly clever methods, but this guy was different. They say you can tell a tree that will grow well by its leaves. This fellow seemed to have something that could take him higher than any of the ones he had seen so far. However, there was one thing he needed to clarify. Mok Jaeyoung. Yes. You're from the righteous faction's Yen Mok Sword Manor, right? Yes. You don't have to give short answers now. I understand. From what I've heard, you and that fellow named Mok Yucheon were brought here as hostages in exchange for leaving the Yen Mok Sword Manor alone as an expelled disciple. Is that correct? At the demon mask's words, Mok Jaeyoung inwardly felt puzzled. Did he not know the exact reason why he had come here? He had thought he would know that it was to memorize and master the secret manual called the Treasure of the Heaven and Earth Society. Then, he didn't feel the need to reveal this. Mok Jaeyoung just nodded and replied. That's right. At this answer, the demon mask's eyes narrowed through the gaps of the mask. Then he spoke in a somewhat heavy voice. But it's strange. Xing. No sooner had he finished speaking than a sword was pressed against Mok Jaeyoung's neck. Mok Jaeyoung's eyes sharpened at this. He was sure he had heard the sound of the sword being drawn and even saw the muscles moving. Yet without blinking, the sword was suddenly at his neck. Fast. It was a quick blade, too fast to even recognize. He understood why Chong Ryong had said his current skills were still far from being able to do anything within the Heaven and Earth Society. It was difficult to gauge how strong he was. As he pondered this, the demon mask continued. Even though you were forcibly brought here against your will, why did you reveal the Righteous Alliance's spies? This was what the demon mask wanted to confirm. No matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't understand why Mok Jaeyoung had revealed this. I had hoped to be rewarded for informing you of the spies, so this is unexpected. Before you speak of rewards, you must first convince me. Is that so? One of the demon mask's eyebrows rose. He had the tip of a sword pressed against his neck, and with just a bit of force, the sword would pierce through. He was in a situation where he was being doubted, yet he showed no signs of wavering. The demon mask spoke in an impressed tone. Do you realize that you're in a position to be suspected? How could I not when there's a sword at my neck? Then are you gutsy? Or do you have something that can dispel suspicion in an instant? Let's say it's the latter. At Mok Jayanun's words, the demon mask clicked his tongue. Then he warned in a low voice. Let me warn you in advance. Within the Corpse Blood Valley, the authority over life and death lies with me. You may lead this office as a corpse. Sizzle. No sooner had he finished speaking than a scorching heat emanated from the sword. Wondering what this was as the sword's heat rose, Chong Ryong's voice rang in his ear. It seems that this man is his descendant. Huh? What did she mean by that? As he felt puzzled, Chong Ryong spoke. Mortal. Ask the man in front of you. With that, Chong Ryong informed Mok Jayanun of something. Meanwhile, the demon mask brought the sword tip, heated by the scorching energy, even closer and spoke. My patience is not very long. Quickly convince me. Has the Li family now gained control over the fiery yang qi within their bodies? As soon as he finished speaking, the demon mask's eyes trembled. The only visible body part through the mask was his eyes, but one could tell he was considerably shocked. Just as Mok Jayanun had anticipated, the demon mask was truly surprised. How does this kid know about this? Information about the fiery yang qi was something only a few within the Heaven and Earth Society knew. Smack. The demon mask pulled away the sword and grabbed Mok Jayanun's collar with his other hand, pulling him close and interrogating in a whisper. Who the hell are you? How do you? To him who was trailing off, Mok Jayanun smiled brightly and said, Are you asking about the Crimson Flame Sword art? Chapter 81. Master of the Corpse Blood Valley. Part 2. Mok Jayanun smiled brightly and said, How do I know the secret of the Crimson Flame Sword art, you ask? At Mok Jayanun's words, the demon mask's eyes widened even more. Just who was this fellow? He was clearly brought here as a hostage from the Yun Mok Sword Manor and sent to the Corpse Blood Valley on that man's orders. It is his order. Don't concern yourself with whether they're hostages or not and proceed as usual. So he had taken it to mean they could even be killed. But how did this brat know about the relationship between the Crimson Flame Sword art and the fiery yang qi? This was a secret known only to a few, including the society leader. Only 4 people, himself, the head of the Li family, the young master who was his successor, the master of the Sinister Valley, and the society leader. No one else in the Heaven and Earth Society knew. Overwhelmed by countless questions, the demon mask finally revealed his emotions. Smack. Grabbing Mok Jayanun's collar, he pressed the sword against his neck again. Who the hell are you really? Are you truly the Yun Mok Sword Manor's scion? There's no way I'm not. Nonsense. Does it make sense for a mere child of the Yun Mok Sword Manor to know the secrets of our family? Suddenly, the demon mask's eyes narrowed. Right, he had thought something was strange. Could it be that person? No, the society leader was testing him? Show your loyalty for 4 generations. Then, I will allow the Li family to regain the title of king. That had become the Li family's shackle. To prove they had no involvement in the bloody calamity of the Horyang battle, they had stepped down from the position of king. From his grandfather's generation to himself, they had taken on the duty of the Corpse Blood Valley for 3 generations. During that time, their loyalty had been tested several times. And they had firmly proven it. Soon, when his eldest son, the young master, inherited his position, they would reach the promised 4th generation. Bite. The demon mask bit down hard on his lip. I thought we had proven enough. Was it still not enough? So had he sent this to provoke him? If he were to be emotionally swayed here, it would become an excuse, and the prospect of regaining the title of king would become distant. No, perhaps there was no intention of returning it from the start, so this continued. The demon mask gradually regained his composure. Swish! The demon mask pulled away the sword and released his grip on the collar. Then he spoke in a calm voice. Did the society leader send you to test me? What do you mean by that? Don't play dumb. Thinking about it, it was strange. It's odd to bring in two hostages who aren't even the eldest and have them enter here. If you're acting on his orders, I won't interfere further. Something. No need to say more. The reason I summoned you was to confirm whether you were a spy or not. But if you're someone sent by the society leader, there's no reason to question further. While saying this, the demon mask felt relieved that he had regained his composure on his own. If he had been provoked by this fellow or had coveted him as a talent midway, it would have reached the society leader's ears. Fortunately, he had regained his reason partway. Just then. Why aren't you answering my question? At Mok Jayangan's question, the demon mask frowned. Was this fellow trying to provoke him now? Glaring slightly at Mok Jayangan, he warned in a low voice. Even if he sent you, know your place. Even if I'm not one of the 5 kings or 3 chief masters, I am one of the 4 valley masters who rank within the top 12 in the Heaven and Earth Society. The 5 kings and 3 chief masters. It was a title given to the 8 high-ranking executives of the Heaven and Earth Society. Below them were the 4 valley masters. Although the title of Valley Master was lower than the 5 kings or 3 chief masters, it was still certain that they were among the top 12 in the Heaven and Earth Society and were figures of power and unrivaled masters. Oh? Within the top 12 in rank? Mok Jayangan thought he had obtained good information. Just then, Chong Ryong's voice echoed in his mind. At this, the Li family should have received the title of king from the 3 veins, so how did you end up becoming a valley master? You dare. The demon mask flinched for a moment as his anger surged, then soon stopped. If he were not someone sent by the society leader, he would have severed an arm right then and there. The demon mask spoke with fury emanating from him. If you don't get out of here right now, I'll cut you down regardless of whether you were sent by the society leader or not. For a moment, Mok Jayangan saw a vision of himself being cut down. Just from the murderous intent alone, it felt as if invisible sharp blades were being drawn in his mind, making his skin tingle. Perhaps because it was the first time experiencing this phenomenon, rather than fear, he found it intriguing. It was like the feeling of looking at a high scenic view. This bray? The demon mask was dumbfounded by Mok Jayangan's reaction. He had deliberately threatened him out of anger, but instead, he was smirking. Was he truly gutsy? Society leader. Was it intentional this time? Had he sent him to provoke him to the end? Even knowing, this test truly made it difficult to suppress his anger. Just then, Mok Jayangan spoke. Is the reason you're wearing a glove on your right hand and a mask because you still can't control the fiery yang qi and suffered burns? The demon mask's hand trembled. He barely restrained himself from reaching for the sword hilt right then. This fellow truly had a great talent for infuriating people. If you can't leave on your own feet, it seems I'll have to personally escort you out. Smack. The demon mask rose from his seat and reached out his hand to chase Mok Jayangan out. At that moment, Mok Jayangan grasped his sword-pointing finger and assumed a sword-drawing stance. How dare he insolently do this in front of me? The demon mask, who was about to instantly break this with the golden spiral technique, suddenly hesitated. It was because he was surprised to see Mok Jayangan's sword-drawing stance. The demon mask's eyes trembled. This is? Who among the Heaven and Earth Society's executives would not recognize the sword-drawing stance of this sword art? It closely resembled the sword-drawing stance of the Heavenly Vein sword art. Could it be? The demon mask looked at Mok Jayangan with surprised eyes. Something was strange. He remembered the faces of all the society leader's disciples. But no matter how much he thought about it, he had never seen this fellow before. Could it be that he had recently taken on a new disciple? The demon mask parted his lips with a cautious voice. Could it be that you're his? Just then. Swish! Mok Jiangyun extended his sword-pointing finger towards him and gently drew a circular trajectory. It was like a full moon. No. Seeing this, the demon mask's pupils shook. Although it resembled the heavenly vein sword art, the flow of the form was proceeding differently. This was not the heavenly vein sword art. This is... Swish 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 smack. The circular trajectory Mok Jiangyun drew was now precisely targeting the 8 vital points along the demon mask's central line. The demon mask inwardly exclaimed at the flawless precision of the sword form. If one only considered the sword form itself, without the sword intent, it was as if an unrivaled sword master was displaying sword techniques. Tap. The demon mask retreated half a step. At the same time, with one hand behind his back, he grasped his sword-pointing finger and blocked Mok Jiangyun's sword techniques without injecting sword intent or internal energy. Swish 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 smack. Although it was a light form, Mok Jiangyun's sword techniques were all blocked. Except for one. I can't avoid this. The demon mask leaped backward to avoid Mok Jiangyun's sword-pointing finger stabbing towards his brow. Because the completion of the sword form was higher than the sword techniques he had displayed, it was difficult to block the final move in any way. If Mok Jiangyun had continued his sword techniques in this state, it would have been even more troublesome. Gulp. The demon mask swallowed dryly. No doubt about it. He had never seen it directly. But he had heard about it from his grandfather. He unconsciously blurted it out. The lunar vein sword art. Oh. You recognize it. What? At Mok Jiangyun's words, the demon mask momentarily hesitated in bewilderment. He had hoped it wasn't, but was it really the lunar vein sword art? I thought the grandson of Li Waman might not recognize it because of the mask, but this is unexpected. He repeated exactly what Chong Ryong had said. Then the demon mask's reaction was... Xing. He swiftly drew his sword and aimed it at Mok Jiangyun's neck, emanating an immense murderous intent. Who are you? How do you know the lunar vein sword art? And what did you just say? I'd prefer if you asked one question at a time. That way, he could relay Chong Ryong's words one by one. But it was truly a strong aura that made one's flesh tremble. Sizzle. The sword wasn't even touching him, but the heat emanating from it felt like it would melt his flesh. Earlier, he had only felt the heat, but now the sword had become so hot that it visibly glowed scarlet. I can't block this. Could it be possible if he concentrated his death energy into a single point? It seemed unlikely. This man's martial prowess seemed no less than that of the bright sword King Sun Yun, who had wielded that huge blade. Hiss. Steam flowed from the arm of the demon mask holding the sword. The heat was not limited to the sword but seemed to spread throughout his entire body. The room became sweltering with heat in an instant. The demon mask glared at Mok Jiangyun and spoke again. I don't have time to play word games with you. Speak immediately. Otherwise, I'll take you to the sect's headquarters right now. Take me and report that I learned the lunar vein sword art. Shut up. Smack. With those words, the demon mask grabbed the edge of his mask and took it off. Along with it, a face with one side grotesquely distorted by burns was revealed. It was a severe burn that made it understandable why he wore a mask. The demon mask spoke with trembling eyes. The lunar vein sword art's lineage has been severed. Even the only secret manual couldn't be read by anyone and was lost, so how could you? Are you asking because you truly don't know? What? You just said it yourself. That you read the secret manual? How is that possible? Even with the power of the head of the Primal Killing Pavilion, who oversaw the Heaven and Earth Society's esoteric arts, that secret manual couldn't be deciphered. Yet this fellow claimed to have read it? The demon mask, no, Li Jiong frowned. It was hard to believe he had read the secret manual, but the words this fellow was spouting were even more beyond the scope of understanding. He spoke as if he knew too much about his own family, the Lee family. That's impossible. Just by reading the secret manual. Of course, you can't know. What? How could I know about the Lee family's crimson flame sword art or fiery yang qi just by reading the secret manual? Then how do I know? At Mok Jiangun's question, Li Jiyom frowned and spoke. Could it be that you're that person's Wrong. If not descendant, then how? I'm that person's direct previous disciple, you see. At Mok Jiangun's words, Li Jiyom's expression hardened terribly. Was this brat toying with him now? He had heard from his grandfather. The previous society leader of the Heaven and Earth Society had personally ripped out his heart, severed his limbs, and beheaded him, displaying it to everyone as punishment for the crime of the bloody calamity. That was 100 years ago. But how could this fellow, who looked no more than 17 or 18, be his direct previous disciple? Are you telling me to believe those words? Are you truly wishing for death, seeing once is better than hearing 100 times? It was as soon as those words ended. Mok Jiangun took out a wooden doll from his bosom. Then he formed a hand seal and chanted an incantation. Smack. 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 Origin of the world, return to the source, release. Seeing this, Li Jiyom was dumbfounded. Was this fellow truly insane with a death wish? He wasn't even an esoteric master, yet he was chanting some bizarre incantation. Hazy! At that moment, an unbelievable event occurred. Trickle. Trickle. Blood flowed down the walls of the office, and the surroundings were becoming soaked with blood. Shudder. What in the world? Thinking Mok Jiangun had used some kind of sorcery, Li Jiyom tried to behead him with his sword filled with fiery yang qi. Right then, Li Jiyom's eyes widened as if they would tear apart at the sight of the figure rising from the blood pooling on the floor. A peerless beauty with blood-red eyes, wearing a crown and holding a long pipe. The moment he saw her, filled with an overwhelming presence, the image of that person his grandfather Li Waman had spoken of with a ringing in his ears. Naturally overlapped. Chapter 82. Master of the Corpse Blood Valley. Part 3. Grandfather. Is our Li family truly not a family of traitors? Jiyom. Is that question related to the scars on your face? 11-year-old Li Jiyom gave no answer to his grandfather's question. These things were inevitable while attending the sect's martial arts academy. Traitors, a family of betrayal. He endured all kinds of disregard and harassment. He tried to ignore it and fought back against their bullying. However, it was meaningless. It was a shackle that had come down from his grandfather, who had pledged loyalty to the disappeared lunar vein, and it was the price. Is it not a shackle that our Li family can never escape from? Jiyom. His grandfather looked at Li Jiyom, full of scars, with pity. Then, embracing him warmly, he comforted him with a gentle yet firm voice. Do you remember what this old man told you? Lying on firewood and tasting gall. Lying on firewood and tasting gall. It means to endure hardships for the future by sleeping on thorny brushwood and chewing on bile. His grandfather would habitually say those words to him. That was because his grandfather's honor, who had been one of the 10 founders of the sect and walked in high places, had fallen to the bottom after that day. Why aren't you answering? I don't know anymore. He had tried to endure as his grandfather had said. However, it was futile to try to mend his increasingly shattered heart. Why did his grandfather, his father, and he himself have to suffer like this? Even though it was not a sin they had committed, just because they had pledged loyalty, did they have to be rejected by the sect to this extent? Grandfather, why don't you just pledge eternal loyalty to the society leader, ah? That day, for the first time, he saw a terrifying look on his grandfather's face. His grandfather, who had never expressed it, was enraged to this degree at the mention of pledging loyalty to the society leader and escaping the stigma of a shackle. Why was he angry at him? Had he said something wrong? For the first time, a sense of rebellion arose in his surging heart. Did I say something wrong? Why must we, a meritorious family and one of the sect's founding members? Ack. Li Jiom could not continue speaking due to the ear-splitting pain. To him, suffering in pain, his grandfather spoke with bloodshot eyes. Regardless of the outcome, it is natural for a retainer to trust their lord until the end. Did this old man teach you otherwise? That so-called lord has gone astray, and our family has even been branded as traitors. But what meaning does that have? And didn't you also accept that fault, which is why you accepted being demoted to a valley master and imprisoned in the corpse blood valley for 4 generations? The more he thought about it, the more infuriating it was. Why didn't his grandfather strongly assert that he had no connection to that person? Why were they sharing in that person's sins? Because he was a retainer? I can't accept it. After that day, Li Jiom no longer conversed with his grandfather. And he gritted his teeth and immersed himself in martial arts training. He couldn't endure it without immersing himself in something. As a result of his immersion in training, he became the first in his family to successfully reach the 5th stage of the Crimson Flame Sword Arts Advanced Technique, the Blazing Cultivation, before coming of age. Li Jiom became even more motivated by this opportunity. I can do it. Among his family's ancestors, no one had completed the Crimson Flame Sword Art. Even his grandfather's limit was the 8th stage. This was because the more one cultivated the blazing cultivation, the stronger the fiery yang qi became, and it didn't just end with it becoming stronger but also burned the practitioner's own body. However, he was confident that he could surpass the 8th stage and reach the 9th and even the 10th stage realm. And perhaps this excessive desire became poison? Do not attempt the 6th stage until the 5th stage is perfectly ingrained in your body. Ignoring his father's warning, Li Jiom's body burst into flames as he recklessly attempted the 6th stage. Upon reaching the 6th stage of the blazing cultivation, one could imbue the Crimson Flame Sword Art with fiery yang qi, but he had failed and suffered a backlash. In an instant, the flames engulfed his arm and half of his face, and he couldn't come to his senses. The rampaging fiery yang qi had already surpassed the level he could control. Was he going to die like this after being too greedy? At that moment, someone grabbed him as he was rampaging. And they absorbed the rampaging fiery yang qi and stabilized it. The one who absorbed the fiery yang qi from his burning body was none other than his grandfather, Li Waman. Barely regaining consciousness amidst the pain, Li Jiom couldn't hide his shock. Like his grandfather and father, if one forcibly accepted the fiery yang qi without being able to perfectly control it, sizzle, the fire would turn against oneself. Thanks to taking away the fiery yang qi, Li Jiom's body could be stabilized, but his grandfather Li Waman was not the same. In an instant, his entire body was engulfed in flames. It was on a level incomparable to Li Jiom's. No. No. Grandfather. Grandfather. Li Jiom rushed forward, trying to calm Li Waman's fiery yang qi. However, grandfather Li Waman used his profound true energy to prevent him from entering his vicinity, making it impossible to approach. Grandfather. No, Grandpa. It had been nearly 4 years since they had been this close, and it had to be like this. Thanks to his profound internal energy, his body was slowly burning, but his grandfather's flesh had already turned red and oozing. Grandpa. Please. Please. Li Jiom tried to forcibly break through his true energy. Grandfather Li Waman slowly shook his head at him with a bitter face. He could tell from the shape of his lips. Don't come, my grandson. That sight tore Li Jiom's heart apart. Watching his grandfather's body slowly burn right in front of him, his feelings were utter despair. He waited for his grandfather's true energy to weaken and tried to somehow subdue the fiery yang qi, but this was too painful. Please. Please. He begged his grandfather to withdraw his true energy. However, his grandfather did not withdraw his true energy until his flesh was completely burned away. Only when his breath ceased did the barrier formed by his true energy disappear. Li Jiom screamed. His despair at witnessing his grandfather dying from start to finish because of him was tragic. If possible, he wanted to exchange his life with his grandfather's. However, that was impossible. Ugh. After wailing and crying for more than half a day, Li Jiyong could only stop when he fainted from exhaustion. After waking up like that, everything proceeded quickly and in a complicated manner. It was because he had to hold a funeral for his deceased grandfather. He confessed to everyone in the family, including his father, that his grandfather had died because of him. However, no one blamed him. Even if you were hasty, it's not your fault. It's the fault of all of us for not teaching you properly and giving weak warnings. Please, please punish me. His father, who had become the head of the family, shook his head and firmly refused. It was because his grandfather Li Waman would not have wanted that. But if your grandfather had resented you even a little until his last breath, then do so. He hadn't. Even while enduring the immense pain of his body burning, his grandfather never showed it. He just kept his mouth shut with the most indifferent face possible, as if worrying about him would hurt his heart. All of that was consideration for him. Throughout the funeral, Li Jiyong silently shed tears. After holding his grandfather's funeral amidst sorrow, Li Jiyong came across a line of poetry left behind by his grandfather. It was like the deceased's last will. Ah, the day I looked at the black robe and followed behind always lingers. No matter how much time passes, how could I ever forget that time in my dreams? He thought he had no more tears left to shed. Yet seeing this, painful tears flowed out as if being squeezed. Even though he was one of the 10 founders, most of the executives, including the society leader, did not attend the funeral due to the stigma of disgrace, yet he insisted on loyalty until the end. Did that mean he believed in that person that much? His heart grew complicated. Li Jiyong found that person so hateful. However, after seeing his grandfather's last words expressing longing for his former lord, he felt conflicted. That person whom his grandfather had believed in until the end. The bastard who inherited the Li family's orthodox lineage had insulted his grandfather's loyalty and will. Grandfather. At that moment, Li Jiyong made a decision. His grandfather's will, which he had upheld nobly until death while enduring everything with patience. He would inherit that will. This unworthy grandson will carry on that loyalty. Even if it was a terrible stigma. Even if it was a time of suffering. He decided to carry on that will in order to restore his deceased grandfather's honor. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. It can't be. The master of the corpse Blood Valley, Li Jiyong, couldn't hide his shock at the sight unfolding before his eyes. At first, he thought Mok Jiangan was using some bizarre sorcery. However, seeing that being taking form amidst the blood, he was at a loss for words. A peerless beauty with blood-red eyes, wearing a crown and holding a long pipe. That face where arrogance and majesty coexisted. The moment he saw this, the image of that person his deceased grandfather Li Waman had spoken of with a ringing in his ears naturally overlapped. Don't hate that person too much. The master that this old man devoted half his life to serving was not the despicable traitor you think. That person was stronger and more beautiful than anyone else in the sect. He had just lightly brushed off his grandfather's words. It was because he didn't think it outweighed the wounds he had received while growing up. However, the moment he saw her, he understood his grandfather's words. They say those who rule are born to do so. Ah. The being before his eyes seemed literally born to rule. Just by looking down as if to subdue, he felt a shudder and even reverence at her overwhelming presence. Then, Mok Jiangan's voice reached his ears. How do you feel after directly seeing that person? That person. Li Jiyong's heart pounded and raced. Was this being before his eyes truly that person his grandfather had longed for until the end? At that moment, Li Jiyong knelt on one knee as if his legs had given out. Thud. It didn't matter whether the being before his eyes was a ghost or whatever. He had vowed before his grandfather's spirit tablet to inherit the noble loyalty he had upheld until death. Li Jiyong bowed his head, clasped his hands together, and paid his respects. Li Jiom, head of the Li family, pays his respects to the Lord, the master of the lunar vein. At Li Jiom's utmost greeting, a glint of interest flashed in Mok Jiangun's eyes. On the other hand, Chang Ryong glanced at Mok Jiangun with a triumphant gaze. "Did you see that, mortal?" She had boasted to Mok Jiangun. Even if the other rotten ones were unknown, if it was the blood descendant of Li Wamun, whom she knew, he would still uphold that loyalty. At her words, Mok Jiangun had inwardly sneered. A whole century had passed. Yet it was ridiculous to think that the will of loyalty would remain. You've become a vengeful spirit, yet you believe in humans? He found it truly foolish. Even in just a few years, everything fades. So, thinking that loyalty would continue when the person in question had died and disappeared, wasn't that just a vain hope? However, something truly unexpected happened. It turned out differently from my intention. Mok Jiangun smacked his lips. He had wanted to see her reaction, unable to hide her disappointment as her vain hopes were shattered. Yet he had ended up making her elated instead. How unfortunate. Well, it wasn't entirely bad. The fact that the loyalty had been passed down even after 100 years meant it was worth using. Just as Chang Ryong was about to open her mouth. Long. Right at that moment. Clap. 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 Mok Jiangun formed a hand seal with one hand and extended the wooden doll towards Chang Ryong. Forbidden seal, formless figure, two names become one, quickly obey and seal. As soon as the incantation ended, her spirit body, which had barely emerged, was instantly sucked into the wooden doll. With that, the blood-stained ghost realm formed by Chang Ryong disappeared, and the office instantly returned to its original state. Shudder. Noticing this change, Li Jiom frowned and raised his head. Where had that person who was there just a moment ago disappeared to? Of course, Chang Ryong was inside the wooden doll. Squirm. The wooden doll wriggled, and Chang Ryong's voice echoed in Mok Jiangun's ear. "You damn mortal bastard. What the hell are you doing?" She had barely revealed her spirit body and confirmed his loyalty. Then, she should have drawn this fellow in and given him orders, but why was he suddenly sealing her back into the wooden doll? Meanwhile, Mok Jiangun spoke. "Did you see? That person has become a vengeful spirit with lingering resentment and is with me." "You bastard." Li Jiom stood up and looked at Mok Jiangun. That person's appearance just now was definitely not an illusion or anything like that. Li Jiom asked Mok Jiangun. "Where is that person?" "I just told you. That person is with me." "Then let me see that person again. I have so many things I want to ask." At Li Jiom's request, Mok Jiangun pointed at himself with his thumb. "Isn't that person right in front of your eyes?" "What?" At Li Jiom's retort, asking what he was talking about, Mok Jiangun smiled brightly and said, "I am that person's vessel of possession. It may be difficult for you to understand, but when that person possesses me, that person and I become one." "Huh." At Mok Jiangun's words, Chang Ryong inside the wooden doll was dumbfounded. He had barely shown her form, so why did he seal her back inside this? Mok Jiangun's purpose was clear. That loyalty spanning generations. I'll take it for myself. Chapter 83. Master of the Corpse Blood Valley. Part 4. Chang Ryong, who had noticed Mok Jiangun's intention, clicked her tongue inwardly. What kind of guy was he? The Li family had maintained their loyalty to her for over 100 years, spanning generations. Yet watching Mok Jiangun snatching away that loyalty in this manner made her anger surge. She felt like breaking the ceiling wooden doll right away, popping out, and beating the hell out of that mortal fellow's head with her long pipe. However, that anger did not last long. What are you trying to do, mortal? Rather, she became curious about Mok Jiangun's intention. He could have borrowed the power of the Li family through her, so why did he need to snatch it away like this midway? At that moment, Mok Jiangun spoke. You know that I am that person and that person is me, so why are you just standing there? That's... At those words, the master of the corpse Blood Valley, Li Jiyong, suddenly hesitated. He knew well what the word possession meant. It literally meant being possessed by a ghost, didn't it? Vessel of possession for that person? Then should he consider this fellow Mok Jianan as the master of the lunar vein? Since he did not have much faith in the strange arts, even though the Heaven and Earth Society had consulting esoteric masters, he felt somewhat hesitant. It also gave him a strangely uncomfortable feeling. Then Mok Jianan said, "You directly saw the spirit body, yet you still can't believe it? The atmosphere and everything is completely different, so would you believe it if he suddenly lied about being possessed?" Chang Ryong clicked her tongue and interjected. At this, Mok Jianan smiled brightly and said, "I was confident that you would inherit loyalty spanning generations, and that's why I even revealed this secret, but it's disappointing. And no, that's... Then if I keep the promise from back then, will you believe me?" "When you say back then?" "The Crimson Flame Sword Art. Could it be?" Li Jiyong's eyes trembled. That was because he recalled the words he had heard when learning the Crimson Flame Sword Art from his grandfather. The blazing cultivation was originally devised by that person and this old man together. We had tried to create the most suitable advanced cultivation technique for the Crimson Flame Sword Art. However, before we could complete it, that tragedy occurred. Just like him, Mok Jianan also recalled what Chang Ryong had said. "Once, I made a promise with the head of the Li family, that fellow's grandfather Li Waman, to complete the unfinished blazing cultivation together. However, that promise could not be fulfilled while alive. It was fulfilled after death. As she became a higher-grade vengeful spirit over a long time, she regained her reason and gradually realized the parts she had not understood while alive. One of those was the blazing cultivation of the Crimson Flame Sword Art." Mok Jianan extended his hand to Li Jiyong with a smile and said, "Although I have returned as a vengeful spirit with deep resentment, if the Li family follows me once again, I will teach you the completed circulation technique of the blazing cultivation that I realized only after death." "Damn you, mortal!" At Mok Jianan's words, Chang Ryong's frustration surged. She had just informed him of what was wrong with the technique and what needed to be changed. An ordinary person would forget after hearing it once, but this bastard has memorized it, hasn't he? Mok Jianan's memory surpassed common sense. She had gotten angry and wanted to see how he would persuade without her help. But it seemed he was truly going to snatch away the loyalty. Completed circulation technique. At Mok Jianan's words, Li Jiyong's eyes trembled even more. 3 generations, from his grandfather to himself, had tried to complete the technique but failed. In fact, it was difficult to complete from the beginning. One had to bear the huge risk of directly verifying it by sending the fiery yang qi to the acupuncture points, which could cost one's life if done incorrectly. If it had been with that person, we might have completed it. Grandfather. But you should be able to do it. Recalling his grandfather again, Li Jiyong's heart ached. At this, he looked at Mok Jianan's face, pounded his tingling chest, and knelt on one knee. "I'm not kneeling because of the completed circulation technique." "Then why?" "It's because you didn't forget the promise you made with my grandfather, no, our family, and that's why I'm pledging my loyalty once again like this." "Promise." "You have returned even as a vengeful spirit to resolve the long-cherished wish of my grandfather and our Li family, so how could I dare to doubt you?" Thud. Then Li Jiyong completely prostrated on the ground. Li Jiyong, head of the Li family and master of the corpse Blood Valley, once again pledges his loyalty to the master of the lunar vein. "Please accept my vow." With that, he touched his forehead to the ground 3 times, expressing his respect and loyalty. Looking down at this, Mok Jianan raised the corner of his mouth as if satisfied. Then Chang Ryong's voice rang in his ear. "You crazy mortal bastard. What are you doing, snatching away others' loyalty? The loyalty would have naturally passed on to you if you had just stayed still, since you become the direct previous disciple and I won't be dragging you around forever even after death. Are you feeling refreshed after forcibly taking it?" She seemed quite angry. This was the first time he had seen Chang Ryong talk so much. Well, it made sense for her to be angry after he had snatched away the loyalty of a faithful retainer who had waited for her for 100 years, separate from her grudge. She probably thought he was trash. However, I understand your feelings, but my goal is not to be swayed by your hand. Mok Jiang'an had only one reason for coming here. It was to find the ghost sword, who might be related to taking revenge on the one who killed his grandfather. However, if Chang Ryong took the lead, moved her former subordinates, and wielded that power, things would only flow in the direction she wanted. Mok Jiang'an did not want the situation to be created that way. It's only secondary to me. Resolving Chang Ryong's grudge was definitely not a priority for him. She was also a vengeful spirit who would have tried to devour him if not for their predestined bond. Although they had now established a master-disciple relationship due to their absolute bond of fate, Mok Jiang'an fundamentally never trusted anyone. Therefore, he had no intention of giving Chang Ryong the initiative. *****. Is this the circulation technique completed by you, my liege? The master of the corpse Blood Valley, Li Jiyong, received the circulation technique written by Mok Jiang'an with trembling hands. It had been the aspiration of the family to complete the technique for 3 generations, so he could not hide his excitement. Exclamations flowed from Li Jiyong's mouth as he read through the technique. Ah! How could they have approached the qi circulation method in this way? Li Jiyong spoke in amazement. It's truly remarkable. I never thought of directly circulating the fiery yang qi from the diaphragm to the yang acupoints. But if this works, it seems we can control the energy to enter the 9th stage. To devise this so easily. Easily devised, my ass. I only realized it after death when my ghost eyes opened. Chang Ryong grumbled in an angry voice, still not appeased. An advanced cultivation technique like the blazing cultivation that could directly handle fiery yang qi had a high risk in the first place, so it could only be completed after countless trials, errors, and sacrifices. In a way, from Li Jiyong's perspective, it could be said that he had encountered a fateful opportunity. As he continued reading the technique, Li Jiyong frowned. Then he carefully said to Mok Jiang'an, "But my liege, it seems you haven't written the entire technique." "That's right." "Pardon? I only wrote half of it." At those words, Li Jiyong was about to ask why but soon closed his mouth. Looking at Mok Jiang'an's smiling face, he could guess what his intention was. "Did you do it on purpose?" "That's right." "Why did you?" "Even though I completed the technique, we should be careful." "I did it because I was worried that you might be too hasty and get burned again." "Ah." At Mok Jiang'an's words, Li Jiyong let out a small gasp. Was it because he was concerned that he might bring about a situation where he would be consumed by the fiery yang qi if he recklessly tried to master the completed technique? He seemed to have misunderstood. He had thought that it might be because Mok Jiang'an couldn't fully trust him yet. Chang Ryong snorted. "Even after receiving a pledge of loyalty, you sure have a hard time trusting." She knew Mok Jiang'an well. She was certain that the reason he didn't teach the entire technique was definitely not out of concern for Li Jiyong. Yes, correct. Of course, that was accurate. Mok Jiang'an did not completely trust Li Jiyong even though he had pledged loyalty. That's why he had only provided the appropriate bait. Trust him moderately. I guarantee you Li member's loyalty towards me. At her words, Mok Jiang'an showed a faint smile. Her trust in her former loyal subordinate was her freedom. But he was different. He intended to maintain some level of vigilance until he was certain. At that moment, Li Jiyong put the paper with the technique written on it into his bosom and spoke. "But my liege, if it's not disrespectful, may I ask what happened that day at the Horyang battle 100 years ago?" "Horyang battle? What was that?" At his question, Mok Jiang'an's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect the master of the corpse Blood Valley, Li Jiyong, to suddenly ask about Chang Ryong's past that he didn't know about. At this, Chang Ryong spoke in a sneering voice. "Do your best. I won't help or interfere with anything related to the Li family, especially with you, mortal. She had no intention of telling him the information since he had snatched away the Li family's loyalty. It meant for him to bear the hardship properly. Horyang battle. It was a memory she could never forget. That memory had become the root of her becoming a vengeful spirit. In the first place, she had no intention of telling this mortal fellow right away, so she thought it was perfect. Just then, Mok Jiangnan spoke nonchalantly. You want to know about that? At this, Chong Ryang was dumbfounded. Was he asking what he wanted to know without knowing anything? Then Li Jiyom replied. Yes. My grandfather believed in her liege until the end, but due to the incident that day, he was demoted from a king to a valley master, and our main family was expelled from the castle and has been imprisoned here in the Corpse Blood Valley for 3 generations. At Li Jiyom's words, Chong Ryang felt bitter. The Li family was a founding family of the Heaven and Earth Society, yet they were humiliated like this. Just how far were they willing to insult her and ruin the Heaven and Earth Society? Indeed, she could never forgive him. At that moment, Mok Jiangnan said, How does the Valley Master know about what happened that day at the Horyang battle? I'm curious about how you and the sect know about it. What? At Mok Jiangnan's question, Chong Ryang inwardly clicked her tongue. This fellow always found a way out somehow. On the contrary, she did not expect him to throw a question back like this. No, was it because he could come up with words in any way since he had no difficulty lying at all? You mortal bastard, really? As she found it absurd, Li Jiyom carefully said, I apologize, but is it alright to tell you this as it is? It's fine. You have to tell me as it is so that I can tell you what happened that day at the Horyang battle. Mok Jiangnan spoke as if he didn't mind. While doing so, he glanced at the wooden doll in his bosom and smirked. You should have just given me a hint. Then there would have been no need to be led like this. But could he find out what kind of relationship Chong Ryang had with the Heaven and Earth Society and what secrets she held through this?